This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cavins.
So last week we finished off with the offense. This week it's the defense, a complete breakdown about this roster and what Greg thinks is going to happen moving forward. Let's start with the defensive line, Greg. Obviously, lots of changes, a ton of changes along the front. How do you see this falling along as we get ready for camp to start up in about a month or two?
Well, the first thing, Nick, is I think this team, and I don't think we've talked about this too much. Maybe we've hinted at it, but I don't think this is a big deal. But for some people, it will be. I think this team's going to be a 3-4, and I also think, and let me mention his name before I forget him because he's not on the depth chart. But I think the signing of Harvey Lange, the former undrafted free agent here, who got in a car crash, had injury issues, played well for the Jets, especially against the Patriots last year. He was flying around the field. He's another linebacker, like I tweeted the other day. I think they now have 8 billion linebackers. And so I think it goes to that this team's going to be a base 3-4. For years, they trended more towards a 4-3 or a 4-2 or 5-2, what have you. Now, at least the starting off point, I think, is going to be a 3-4, which means 3 defensive linemen. Now, look, I've talked to people around the team, and I asked them about linebackers or what have you, and what are you going to do? And they're like, it's not going to matter. I mean, we play almost 60% of our snaps out of sub is the answer that I get. So, look, I would say it's not insignificant because of all the run difficulties that they had. And the run difficulties, which we talked about ad nauseum, Nick, set the stage for they couldn't play any defense. They had the worst first and second down defense in the league. It led to third downs that were manageable for the other team. They couldn't get off the field. And so it's got to start with the run defense. And I think the Patriots over the years, traditionally, when they've really needed to stop a run against a team, they've been in the 3-4. So I think their base is going to be 3-4. And when I look at the defensive line, I think the opening day starters for now are going to be Henry Anderson. Right or left end doesn't really matter. They mostly go to strength of the formation. But I would say Henry Anderson at right end, Davon Godchaux, who they signed from Miami as the nose tackle to open, and Lawrence Guy at the other defensive end. I think those are right now. They're the most experienced guys. And look, I think Anderson's position is in competition, and I think you could lump a bunch of guys in there, including Byron Cowart, Carl Davis. Spence is more of a nose tackle. Montravius Adams, who they signed from the Packers, if I remember correctly, and Christian Barmore, who they traded up in the second round to get. I think Godchaux and Guy are going to play, and they're going to play a lot. The third position on the defensive line there's a little bit of a competition there. I think that Anderson has a big leg up. He's played in this style of defense, whether it was the Colts or the Jets. He knows what's expected. He's a lunch pail type of guy. He's not going to really provide all that many splash plays, but he knows what's going on. He's long. He's tough to move. So I think he clearly has an edge at the other position. But I do think that there will be a competition, and I think that Barmore has the best chance in my mind. If he pops in training camp, if he's consistent, if he does all the right things behind the scenes. I don't put it out of question. I don't think he's going to start, but I think he'll get significant minutes probably in sub to start.
So is he your guy to surprise possibly on that defensive line?
Good question. My guy to surprise there. Yeah, see, I'm a little bit down on Cowart. He had a chance. Last year was his golden opportunity to sort of, take a starting role and roll with it, and he just never took it. I think they really like Carl Davis and Akeem Spence. But yeah, I guess I would have to say by default, I guess I would have to say Barmore. Even though I don't, with a guy like him, Nick, and I know I wrote about this last year, and I'll be writing about this with at BSJ where I do a sort of like a rookie development program. Sort of this is because what the Patriots do is they give rookies piecemeal and they say, hey, look, just take this and then master it. Then we'll talk about other things. And with a guy like Barmore, who clearly has some, off the practice field sort of red flags, they're not going to overwhelm him. So I would say for the start of the season, Barmore's not going to surprise. Could he surprise by the end of the season if he masters his role? He's probably the new Adam Butler to start out if he does all the right things. Yep. I think that's a ceiling for the first half of the season is Adam Butler. And then we'll see. But I do think he has the opportunity. He will have the opportunity to surprise. Whether he grabs it or not, we'll see.
All right, let's move on to edge. Obviously, we know who's starting at edge. Kyle Van Noy, Matthew Judon. Just your thoughts quickly about those two guys before we move down a little bit on the depth chart.
Yeah, I think that, Van Noy, I do think as we go along in the summer, depending on what's going on, with Uche and some other people and Winovich and Dietrich Wise and I do think there's a chance. I think there's a small chance that Van Noy, at the end of the day, for the betterment of the team, there is a chance that Van Noy could be moved to stand-up linebacker next to Hightower. Now, I don't think that's likely, but I think it's one of those things where the Patriots are like, all right, well, are we better if we move Van Noy there and put Uche and Winovich as a platoon on the edge? And does that make us better? If they can't solve the inside, I think they'll start with trying to solve the inside linebacker position. Could be McMillan, Raekwon, who I've liked at times over the years. Who knows? Maybe Bentley and Jennings all of a sudden come to the forefront. Cameron McGrone, the rookie, probably he's hurt coming off the ACL and stuff like that. But I think that Van Noy has a chance to go there. But I think that those are two really experienced guys. Judon, there's a little bit of a fear of he kind of comes and goes as far as how effective he is during games. He's got to grind it out here a little bit more to really be successful. But provided he does that, he does everything well. He sets the edge well. He rushes the passer well. Consistency is what we're looking for. Van Noy is certainly consistent when he's there on the edge. He's terrific. I would say in my mind, he's a little bit better than Rob Ninkovich was at Ninkovich's prime. I think that Van Noy's everybody's good, but they're in good. If they wind up with Van Noy and Judon, they're in good hands there.
All right, so let's look at the secondary guys on the edge. I think we could safely say that Wise is going to play a decent amount, right? He's a trusted guy. He's coming back. They know what they have in him. The most interesting battle to me is going to be Chase Winovich versus Ronnie Perkins, because, you say that you love the film on Perkins. You think he's exactly what this defense was missing. He's got a little bit of nasty. He's got toughness. He's got physicality. And you've also questioned Winovich in the past. So Right now on the right side, you have Van Noy, then you have Winovich, Perkins. Let's start with that battle, Greg, between Chase and Ronnie and what you make of that. And can Perkins make some headway and kick Winovich down the depth chart?
Yeah, Nick, it's a good question, and I think it's interesting. I do think that they're going to be pitted against each other, and I think it's basically I don't exactly know how they would do this in training camp, but I think it's going to come down to they're going to put them in a lot of toughness drills, a lot of edge drills, like holding the edge against the run, and they do have these drills. They have these drills where they'll go one-on-one against the tight ends or one-on-one against the tackles, pass rush, but they also do running versions. And I think they're going to see, who's the tougher son of a gun there on the edge. There's no question that off of his college film and also off of Belichick's comments that they think it's Ronnie Perkins. And I don't necessarily disagree with them. I mean, I think that Chase certainly has, one of the highest motors you will ever see. And he has very good pass rushing instincts. There's no doubt about that. And he's been a very effective pass rusher. It's other things. And also, Nick, And here's where I think ultimately things get decided. And when it comes down to the end of the day, towards the end of training camp, when they're having these personnel meetings of what are we going to do here, who are we going to keep, who are we maybe going to trade, is they're going to ask, who do you trust more to execute the play? Because a lot of the issues would not, I don't want to say a lot. Some of the issues with Winovich among the team is that sometimes he can't be trusted. And that goes to when I asked, like, well, why don't you try him an inside linebacker? Like, I think he could, Clay Matthews made the transition there. Other players similar to Winovich and Matthews have done that. And the response was, we can't even trust him on the edge. How are we going to trust him to do the right thing in the middle of the defense? And so that's the big thing. I mean, if Ronnie Perkins comes out there and lives up to his billing, which is a tough SOB, really strong at the point of attack. He freelances a little bit too, but not as much as Winovich. If Perkins wins out on all that stuff, then I think you have a situation where Winovich could be on the block at some point during training camp.
Yeah, when you put all these pieces together, what you've talked about so far, what Belichick has right now is some flexibility between the linebacker position and the edge position. Because, hey, if inside linebacker, if Josh Uche, who we'll talk about in a minute, if he doesn't pop, if he doesn't follow up the rookie season, which showed a lot of promise, if that's what happens, then you can now move Van Noy in Uche's spot. You can move Perkins up. You can have Perkins and Uche work on the edge. You can have Winovich, Perkins, and Uche work on the edge. You can say, hey, no, we're really, really confident in Perkins, and you can move on from Winovich and maybe pick up an asset for next year's draft. I mean, what Belichick has in all of those spots is something he definitely did not have last year, and that is some depth and some flexibility in the ability to move guys in certain spots, which will make this defense better given the circumstances at that very moment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Nick, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, we're used to a lot of flexibility with the Patriots, and that Belichick has options. You look at every position from the defensive line to the edge to the linebackers to cornerbacks. Okay, maybe not so much. Maybe they will at some point down the line. The safeties, they have multiple types of guys. Like, I don't think there's ever been a training camp, heading into a training camp, Nick, where I've looked at a roster and been like, at the end of the day, I don't know where the puzzle pieces are going to come down. I mean, you have a lot of guys that could play multiple positions. And we know that the Patriots are always like, it's cliche. It's ridiculous beating like a dead horse around here. The Patriots look for versatility and they want this and they want that. And that's certainly been a constant theme throughout the years, but I've never seen anything like this. I mean, just look at the safeties, for example, Nick, and we'll get into them. But Devin McCourty's one guy, former cornerback safety. Jalen Mills, former quarterback safety. Is he a cornerback? Who knows? Adrian Phillips can play box and free. Kyle Duggar can play linebacker and safety. I feel like I'm missing somebody there at safety, but Patrick Chung retired. But there's just a lot of different moving parts, and I think more than any other, this is going to be fascinating to see how things come down at the end. And right now, the Patriots can go in a lot of different directions, and as we've said before, it's going to come down to the practice field. There's going to be a lot of competition this camp, and hopefully that pushes the group up instead of holding them back.
All right, so let's look at inside linebacker. Dante Hightower, we know who he is. We know how good he is. We'll see what happens since he was gone last year. What's he look like early on? But Hightower absolutely is going to start in one of those spots. And then you look at some of the others, right? Raekwon McMillan is a guy, as you said, in spots he's kind of stuck out to you. Other times, not really so much. This morning, we've heard that Cam McGrone is likely going to sit the entire season. So I don't know how much he's going to factor in. A guy that jumped out at me at times, Greg, last year was Terez Hall. I thought at times he had games where he punished people downhill. He showed some quickness from sideline to sideline. But, again, he's a guy that's kind of, he's on the depth chart. But he's somebody who could flash every once in a grand while. The thing that is most interesting to me, though, is Uche Bentley.
Yep.
because a lot of people, I think, might go in and say, well, maybe Belichick plays it safe. Maybe he starts Hightower and Bentley, the two vets. You actually have Uche over Bentley to start with Hightower. Your thoughts on Uche following up a rookie season that, hey, he showed a lot at certain times of what he can do. And I think people, including myself and you, are excited to see what he has in store for his sophomore season.
Yeah. First off, let me get a couple of jokes off my chest.
Okay.
So the Terez Hall thing, yeah, you're right. I mean, he did flash at times last year. I just think it's like, it's what's the cliche in media? It's it. Yeah, actually, I'm not going to say it because who knows? Maybe I'll get in trouble for it. But let's just say that, Terez Hall being out there was, a little bit like last call at the bar. When you're ready to exit. There's a lot of things that look good with what went on that defense last year. And then Cameron McGrone, I just can't get the scene out of the town. When it's like, only in Boston is someone named Albert McGlone. And, I think Cam McGrone, I think his nickname is going to be the town from now on because he reminds me, what's that guy's name? Slane, who played the driver in the town?
I can't remember.
Come on, man.
I have a bad memory with movies and stuff like that. I can't remember.
It's one of my favorite movies. But Hightower, look, I do think I don't want to alarm people, but I do think it's interesting that there's been sort of a dearth of Dante Hightower news. Not that I think that he's not coming back. I mean, I think we've been reporting since December that it looked like a lot of the guys were coming back. Of course, Patrick Chung retired, and I think somebody else might have been released at some point, but I don't know. But anyways, hopefully he follows through, comes back. I don't think it's that big of a deal that he's missed a year. I hear from a lot of fans, and they're just like, oh, he hasn't played football in a year, and there was some of that talk with the college football opt-outs. I don't think it really affected the opt-outs all that much in this draft, and I don't think it's going to affect these guys. I think there's nothing. A lot of these guys get hurt and they're out for the year,
right?
I mean, and then they come back. I mean, so what's the difference? Sure, there's going to be a breaking in period, but at least there is going to be a real off season for them. If it was like COVID last year and there was a similar situation, then you might be a little bit worried. But I feel good about Hightower getting in his work. McMillian, I think there's a three-way race between McMillian, Uche, and Bentley for the other linebacker spot. And again, if none of those guys take a step up, or maybe Uche is better on the edge, then maybe they, out of desperation, they say, you know what? Let's take a look at this in practice for this practice. Let's look at Van Noy next to Hightower.
Right.
Let's move Uche to the edge, or maybe start Winovich or start Perkins. It won't happen with Perkins, but you get my drift. That let's take a look at that in practice, see how it looks. Right. And then we'll go from there. So I think it's a almost 3-4 person race for the other inside linebacker spot. I think that Uche, in my mind, gets the first look. Again, we could throw Harvey Lange in here. I think he's going to be a factor at some point in time with the way he played against the Patriots last year. We all know how Belichick looks at the film and says, oh, that guy kind of kicked our ass. Let's go get him. So I think that I like Uche because, look, if things go to plan, Nick, and Van Noy and Judon are on the edge, where the hell does Uche play?
Yeah.
I mean, he has to play somewhere, and he was a high enough pick.
Yeah, he's got to play somewhere. Not just he's a high enough pick. I think he earned it last year by what he showed when he was given opportunity, which really brings me to the next guy. We've sat here and we just mentioned 4, 5, 6 different names. We have not mentioned Anthony Jennings.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with him. I don't. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think he was a bad player last year. And he struggled in, well, let me change that. At times he was bad last year. Like you could tell he blew more than his own assignments last year. struggled in pass coverage. At times he looked overwhelmed with the speed of the game. Maybe, who knows? Maybe with a full offseason and all that jazz, maybe he's ready and comes with a new attitude. Not that I thought his attitude was bad. I just think he wasn't good enough. But he comes refreshed and ready to battle. I mean, that's possible. But I just think, like we talked about with the edge, I think that Uche has to play somewhere, considering where he was drafted. I think considering the athletic ability that he's shown, the production that he's shown towards the end of last year, I think they need to find a spot for him. And I think ultimately he looked a little bit small for the edge at the NFL level in the time that he's gotten. Not that he can't do it, and I think he can do it on a situational basis. But I think he's more of the heir to the Dante Hightower throne of stand-up linebacker, move to edge, and bring somebody else in at linebacker or a safety on third down. Because I don't think he could take the pounding at his size every down on the edge,
Right.
But I do think he can do it pass rushing on third and longs, and then I think he has the athletic ability to play inside.
All right, let's look at cornerback. This one should be a position that goes rather quickly. Obviously, we have Gilmore on one end on the right side. We've got J.C. Jackson on the left side. We've got Jonathan Jones in the slot. Just kind of want to look at some of these other names. First, Joejuan Williams. Is he gone, or can he stay?
I can't see it. Unless he is completely reborn, I cannot see a situation where he is on the roster come cut downs, save injuries. I just can't see it. He's never had a role in this team. There's no ready role for him. I don't even know what he could do in the offseason to make up the ground. I just think it's coming to the end of the line for him.
If so, just what a wasted opportunity that pick was when you look back, using it on Joejuan Williams.
It's like, what do we call him? Ross I. Williams?
Oh, Ross I. Williams. Yeah, good old Ross I. Williams. All right, so let's look at the other cornerback spots as backups. Michael Jackson, D'Angelo Ross. I want to wait until Miles Bryant because I think you're going to go a little bit longer on Miles. So your thoughts on Michael Jackson and D'Angelo Ross?
Yeah, I think that Jackson's a veteran. They liked him last year, and I think you could put D Virgin as a guy who they signed this offseason. He's very similar to Jackson. I think they're sort of veterans with experience. They've shown some decent play, and so they like to have them around. I think D'Angelo Ross flashed big time last year in training camp, and I think that he gets an opportunity to sort of be the next guy at cornerback for this group. And then, yeah, you're right. Miles Bryant is a whole sort of different conversation. Is he a safety? Is he a cornerback? He's really small, but I think they like the versatility that he brings, and also that he can do, he could play both ways. Also, we should also mention Jalen Mills, because I have a feeling that Jalen Mills for this year might help at cornerback if needed. And then maybe a year from now, when McCourty and Adrian Phillips are free agents, maybe he moves to safety then. But I think they certainly have their choice of guys. I like Ross. I think he's sort of the next, if you're looking for a guy to be the next Malcolm Butler, the next J.C. Jackson as the undrafted free agent, it's D'Angelo Ross. I mean, that's been what he's shown to this point. You could also make the argument for Miles Bryant, but I think he's just different because I think he might ultimately be a safety. I mean, for him as an undrafted rookie last year in COVID, everybody loves to make excuses for players in COVID. They never really sing the praises of guys who actually didn't use that as a crutch or an excuse and went to another level. But for an undrafted rookie in COVID to play at times at both cornerback and safety for the Patriots outside of an emergency situation, it's unheard of. I've never seen that before. And so, sometimes he lacks a little bit physically in terms of how he plays. He's a guy, remember, Nick, I think we talked about this in the last offensive podcast, when we talked about Gunner and how he remade his body from one year to the next. You were like, Okay, now he looks like an NFL player. He didn't before. I think Miles Bryant is my candidate to show up in veteran minicamp in June, and we're like, holy crap, who the hell is that guy? And all of a sudden he's a real player, sort of nickel joker, whatever type of player. I think him and D'Angelo Ross are sort of the next wave, and I'll be interested to see what Miles Bryant looks like this year physically and where the Patriots put him to open up minicamp, because what he did last year, underrated, underappreciated how big that was, what the Patriots asked of him last year.
All right, let's jump back to safety here, because, I feel like when Jalen Mills signed with the Patriots, it caught us, at least many of us, off guard. Said, wait a minute, Jalen Mills, huh? What? And then Patrick Chung retires. And then you look at McCourty and Phillips being free agents after this year, and you go, okay, now it starts to make a lot more sense why they bring in Mills. You talked about his versatility. You expect right now, what's on your depth chart, McCourty and Phillips to be the starters. Just a little bit about those guys before we move on to Duggar and Mills.
Yeah. I think that I heard a lot last year, Nick, and I'm sure you heard it too. A lot of people were like, well, McCourty's not playing that well this year. What's wrong with McCourty? Did he even want to come back? Has he lost a step? And I do think that he's lost maybe a half a step or something like that. But to me, what you saw last year out of Devin McCourty, a couple different things. Number one, without Duron Harmon, they never had another deep safety option on third downs, bring in there. You put Duron Harmon at center field, and now all of a sudden Devin McCourty gets to be the robber and, read the quarterback's eyes and go make plays. Right. That's really what his forte was. He never really got to do that last year because they never had any other options. I mean, to the point that by the end of the season, they were using undrafted free agent Miles Bryant in that role. Enter Jalen Mills as sort of, I think he's going to be the Duron Harmon role to start this year. And I think that frees up Devin McCourty. I think that you will see Devin McCourty rebound and have a better year, even though he's getting, older and older. He's the type of guy, he reminds me of the Rod Woodson types, the Champ Bailey types, the Darryl Green types that they play forever, that they're just built to play football. And I think Devin McCourty is just that. I mean, God, the guy's been, of course, me being a Rutgers grad, I've seen Devin McCourty since he was basically a baby at Rutgers to now. And he's been like the same player throughout his career, like in the same levels, the same consistency. It's
he's the same damn guy. Yeah,
he is. And he's going to be 80 and he's probably going to look the same and probably can run like Michael Vick ran a 4.75 the other day at the Rich Eisen thing. Like that's going to be Devin McCourty. And so, I think them getting Mills has really, we should see Devin McCourty rebound. Adrian Phillips, now that they have 8 billion linebackers, now Adrian Phillips doesn't have to get run over by 300-pound tackles every week.
I think you called it the Lollipop Guild at one point last year.
Oh yeah, I said here we go with the Lollipop Guild, and then of course they got run over and couldn't get off the field and all that stuff. So no more. I mean, if they do go to the Lollipop Guild, it'll be of their own choosing, and like I'm fine with Kyle Duggar can be in my Lollipop Guild. That dude will, jack some people up. He'd be one of those mean guys in the Lollipop Guild. But Phillips is just, thank God, now he can roam a little bit more and do what when he was with the Chargers, he also excelled in the robber role. So now all of a sudden you could have a situation where Devin McCourty and Adrian Phillips are sort of alternating, and the quarterback's like, I'm not sure who the robber is going to be, and they're going back and forth and baiting him, and so I could see a lot of really interesting games there. But I think the Patriots, even without Patrick Chung, Duggar, Bledsoe, the draft pick, they're in really good hands right now at safety, at both safety spots, and possibly into the future, depending on what they do with those two free agents.
I just want to ask you one question about Duggar. How good do you think he could be this year?
It's a great question, Nick, and there's no question that I have a little bit on the line with Kyle Duggar because basically like 1 or 2 games into his career, I was calling him a star, and
What about Jamal Adams?
the next Jamal Adams, and we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping he's damn good, that's for sure. I sort of had similar praise very early for Dietrich Wise on a different level. I didn't call him, Jamal Adams, but I did think that he could be a star around here. And hey, he got to a second contract, so I think that one worked out okay. But I think that Kyle Duggar is just hopefully, and I have no reason to suspect otherwise, because he just seems like a really humble, hardworking kid, lunch pail type. I hope that he put in the work this offseason, both mentally to play in space a little bit better, but also physically to take another level. Because if he comes and he's ready, I look for it more in year 3, Nick, than I do in year 2.
Right.
But who knows? He could arrive earlier, but he has the potential to be a game changer on defense for this team. He has that type of potential, and kudos to Belichick, for the draft pick. Hopefully it keeps working out for them. I just think the kid has star written all over him, but we'll see.
Here's one last thing I'll say about this defense as a whole. And I think it's interesting. We talked about the flexibility, but also when you look at the mix of veteran and young, it gives you a feel of like, okay,
finally.
This exactly. This isn't a defense on its last leg, so to speak. You think McCourty can play forever, but you look at Duggar, you look at Uche, you look at hopefully Barmore, you look at Ronnie Perkins, even you look at Winovich, if he can get it going a little bit more consistently. J.C. Jackson, he might not be around for a while, but he's a younger guy. Like, you have the mix of young, which makes you feel like this defense has some potential to grow and get better. And it's just which guys are going to survive and how long will they be here? Between Phillips and Hightower and Gilmore, how much do those guys have left? But, Patriots fans can look at this defense and say, hey, we got some guys we can get excited about over the next couple of years. This isn't just, okay, we feel like we're playing out the string or we're worried about the impending doom of the age of this defense. You've got some building blocks, and maybe Anthony Jennings does something. Who knows? Maybe. But, you feel good about those other names I just mentioned. All right, let's get to the and by the way, I want to mention that the schedule, of course, is coming out tomorrow. I'm sure we'll have a lot of reaction on that later in the week. But let's jump to the member question of the day. BostonSportsJournal.com, of course. Check them out at BSJ, $39.99 on their annual plan. Top-notch analysis of all the Boston pro sports. Also, of course, if you're a Pats junkie, membership at BSJ gives you access to a ton of video analysis that Bedard does on the coach's film and direct access to him in weekly chats. Greg, this is another week where I depend upon you. You tell me you'll find one. What question did you find from a BSJ member?
Okay, so Aaron J. asks, not that I really wanted to continue to talk about this, but he asked, so I will answer. Barmore is a fascinating pick. Patch actually moved up and gave up multiple picks to get a guy who has red flags. Is this more an Aaron Hernandez situation or Rob Gronkowski situation? Both fell in 2010 draft, albeit for different reasons. What have I learned?
Much different.
Yeah, I would say that I don't think that Barmore is comparable to Hernandez and Gronkowski at all. I think that the only reason that they're the only reason that I have mentioned Aaron Hernandez and Christian Barmore is to talk about the intel that Belichick gets from his closer coaching friends.
Right.
Nick Saban, Urban Meyer. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Those Florida teams had a lot of busts and issues with the Patriots, be it Chad Jackson, any of the, there a bunch of guys. Alabama, a lot of guys have not worked out from Alabama. So my only point is Bill just taking the word of these coaches, their buddies, be like, oh, well, they would bring it up to me if there were any issues. Maybe he doesn't talk about them. Maybe he doesn't ask the right questions because he's comfortable with them. As far as no, Hernandez had issues from my reporting at the time with people worried about possible gang affiliations, people worried about, and there were some violent episodes at Florida, which have been played out in like 8 billion documentaries and podcast series and things like that. If you want to listen to my appearance on the Boston Globe's, I think they call it Warrior Hernandez podcast. I'm on there a lot talking about Hernandez. Rob Gronkowski was all injury. He didn't play the year before. He had the same micro fracture, micro dichotomy, whatever surgery that Caleb Farley, the cornerback, just had. That ultimately was taken in the first round by Titans.
Yep.
So I don't think they're at all similar. Barmore is just one of these guys that people worry about his motivation. How much does he love football? How much does he want to be there? How much is he going to work? How much is he going to put in the effort off the field? Are you going to have to worry about, whether he shows up or studies or things like that? And who knows? Maybe a lot of his problems in the past were just him being a kid, and maybe he's matured now and he'll be fine. You get guys like that in the league. You get some guys who are like that in college who continue in the pros who wash out very quickly. The Isaiah Wilson, who was drafted in the first round by the Titans last year, didn't even last a season out of Georgia. The quarterback at Washington, what was his name? Dwayne Haskins, are two examples of guys who their work ethics were questioned in college, and it continued in the pros to the point where their drafting teams let them go less than 2 years into their careers. Who knows? I have no idea which way Christian Barmore is going to go. It was a risk. I don't think it was a huge risk, but it certainly was a risk. And now we'll see what the kid does here. Like a lot of my things with some of these draft picks and a lot of the stories and the chatter around them, whether it's Mac Jones and blah, blah, blah. I don't really care what a guy did before he got to the Patriots. And I know the Patriots don't care. Belichick has said it. We don't care what they did before. We only care what they've done as a Patriot. Christian Barmore now has a clean slate. Now let's see what he does with the opportunity.
Yeah, and again, they had extra picks. They burnt a 4th round for sure. They gave up 2 to move up, but if he gives you 5 to 7 good years, then I would say it's worth it. We just don't know. We have no idea. The circumstances at Alabama, again, like you said, Greg, maybe he matures. Maybe he already has matured. Maybe he's going to figure it out. Maybe Belichick will help him. Maybe the veterans. We just don't know. He might end up bombing. Hopefully that doesn't happen. The Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles, episode number 70 in the books. We'll be back later on this week. The schedule comes out tomorrow night. We'll have our thoughts on that and more. For now, he's Greg and I'm Nick. Be well.